Could you give us a brief tour of your studio?
Sure. An interesting thing about this studio, Dave, is I have an open air control room.
Yeah.
And the main reason why I did this, because most of my career I was a producer as opposed to being an engineer. Mm-hmm. And I always spent my time in the studio with the band.
Yeah.
You know, and I would be like one of them talking to the engineer, you know. And the only time I would go into the control room was to hear playback or when we were mixing. Mm-hmm. Even when we were overdubbing, I was always in the room.
Yeah.
You know. So I just decided I wanted to be in the same environment. Mm-hmm. And the only setback, if there is a setback, is I have to wear headphones when we track a band, just like the band does.
Right.
So that's the only difference. And I'm not really concerned about, I don't do any EQing coming in. Because I have great microphones, great preamps, and great instruments. So if you have the right stuff, you don't need to EQ a lot. So all I have to be concerned about is when I'm recording is to make sure the levels are right.
I see.
Yeah. And then the main room is a pretty big room. I designed it. And the thing about designing a recording studio is you can know all there is to know, but you're never going to know what it sounds like until it's finished.
Yeah. Until
you play music in it. So that's sort of the crapshoot.
Yeah.
And usually you have to modify things after the fact. And for me, you know, I didn't really have to modify anything.
Really?
I got lucky. I'm not bragging. I just got lucky.
So in terms of like ceiling height, for example, how big of a factor is that in relation?
Well, this is 13 feet, and that's great because you want that open space. But the reason why I put these up there is they're deflectors. So if they weren't there, sound would be bouncing everywhere.
Yeah.
So you have to deaden it to a degree, but still keep it live.
Right.
You know? And that's why all the angles are here. You know, it's for the same reason, to deflect sound.
Right.
You got to build angles. You can't have many parallel walls.
Is there some of your favorite mics?
No, they're the leftovers. They're the ones not actively in use that I use as extra mics.
I see.
And I have more in the closet. Most of the mics I use, they're the two vocal mics I use. These are great microphones. This is a 1961 C24 AKG. This is an amazing microphone. And this is, I think, this is either an early 50s or late 40s U47 Neumann. And these are probably the two best vocal mics you could have. You know, they're unbelievable. And they both have very unique sounds.
Can you talk about guitar amps, miking guitar amps?
Yeah, you know, I just found a new mic. I have 3 amplifiers, and in my opinion, that's all you need.
Yeah.
I have a Vox AC30 that I've owned since the 60s, and I have a deluxe Fender. You know, then I have a little Pro Junior Fender for one sound. You know.
Yeah.
And I'm still in the process of building amp closets downstairs, but right now I record them in here. And I found this new microphone. It's actually an old microphone. But for years I used SM57s on amps. This is a mic from the early 50s. This is a D12 AKG. And I just got it about a month ago, and it's amazing.
Really?
On amplifiers.
Really?
Yeah. It's way better than the 57. But it serves a similar purpose. It's high density mic, you know. You can record a kick drum with that microphone. You know. But it just sounds way better than the 57. It's got much more depth.
And you usually just do one mic on your amps?
Yeah, usually.
Really?
I mean, I've done
front and back.
Yeah, I've done that, but 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, you don't need it unless you're going for a certain effect.
Okay.
But what I try to do in recording, I try to get the most natural sound as I can. So when you're standing in front of a guitar player, you're not behind the amp. You're in front of it.
Sure.
So that's what I try to capture.
Yep.
And, you know, I got a ton of vintage stuff. A 67 Telly, a 57 Les Paul, a 1938 Dobro, Pretty amazing. Sounds amazing.
1938.
38. Yeah.
So what do you do, Jim, if your guitar player wants to hear a live sound without using cans, without using headphones?
That's tough.
Yeah. Can you just put an amp in here? And
Well, I could,
Yeah.
and I do that, but he'd have to. Well, usually the way I do that is I still put the amp in there, and the guitar player stands out here, so he hears it through the speakers. Some of the other guitars I have up there, that's an interesting. The one above the door, that's an 1835 Martin. They started making guitars in 1833.
wow, where'd you find that?
Actually, Terry Stryker Guitar Works.
Uh-huh.
I bought that maybe 10, 12 years ago or something. He called me up one day and he said, I got this guitar. This old lady brought it in. You might want to check this out. And then this one, this Koa wood guitar here. This is a 1928 Koa wood. That's a 1918 Vega. That's a 1966 D35, which I bought new in 1966.
It's in great shape.
I've had 3 tops put on it.
Oh, okay.
Since 1966.
Yeah.
That's a 1954 ES 125, which I bought in 1961 for $10. So I don't know what that's worth. That's probably worth.
He was asking 15.
Yeah, right. I think I had to cut 2 lawns to get that.
Yeah.
I think that's probably worth $6 or $7 grand now, that guitar, somewhere in that ballpark. And that's a J40 from the 80s. This is the guitar I do most of my recording with. It's a great recording guitar.
Yeah.
And
What's your favorite way to record a guitar like that, to mic a guitar like that?
I just put it, again, I use one mic. And I put it right here. You don't put it here, you put it here. Because if you put it here, you're going to get a lot of that low, mid sort of rumble from the sound hole. So you want it off axis of the sound hole. And that way you get really good, you pick up the fingers very well. And you use a tube condenser mic. It's my trick. And everyone compliments me on acoustic guitar, how I record acoustic guitar. I use one microphone, I use a great mic. I usually use the C24.
Okay. Can you tell us about that crazy drum kit?
Yeah, this is a great drum kit. This is a drum kit made in Chicago by a guy named Mitch Greenberg. They're called Bison drums. And I bought these drums probably 10 years ago. But as you can see, look at he invented this hardware. He has his own design. You only see this type of hardware on Bison drums. They're the best sounding drums I've ever heard. Most studios now use Bison snares. You find a lot of studios using Bison snares. Very few studios have a full kit. But these are incredible sounding drums. And the mics I have, I've changed the mic setup in the last couple of years, but originally, when I built the studio, my mic setup really mimicked Jeff Emmerich's mic setup that he did the Beatles.
Sure.
And I've always wanted to do that.
Yeah.
So I did have at one point every mic that he used on Ringo's kit. I've modified a few things. I have a D112 in the kick drum and an SM57 on the snare and a 451 AKG on the hat. But everything else is what he used on the Beatles drums. He had a 47 in front of the kick. He had U64s on the cymbals. He had U67s on the toms, and he had an SM2 as the overhead. So it's essentially his mic setup with a few modifications.
That's great.
And they sound great.
Yeah.
Matt Walker comes over. He's been over a few times just to record his drums here for his projects. He just wants to do his drums, and he goes and records everything else somewhere else.
Yeah.
So it's become a pretty favorite sort of drum spot.
Yeah.
And this room sounds so great.
Yeah.
So I lucked out, Dave. I really did. I got really lucky with how this room sounds.
Yeah.
Because there's so many, variables that you don't know that you're unaware of.